Well, good afternoon, all you gardeners out there in YouTube land. I'm Guy Mussey, a horticulture extension agent with Virginia Cooperative Extension in Stafford County. And this is the second in a series of videos that we were making, instructional videos dealing with anything gardening or plants or entomological for that matter. So today, what we're going to be talking about is shedding some light on the acclimatization of plants. It will get a little technical, but I think when we get down to it, it's going to explain to you what type of light and the type of things that you might have to deal with to make sure that your plants are thriving and growing well. So the first thing we want to talk about is there is a difference between shade leaves and sun leaves, and it could be on the same plant. The leaves that are out in the full sun will morphologically, anatomically even, be a little bit different than the shade leaves, which are deeper in the canopy. And they can change by leaf thickness. For instance, full sun leaves will be thicker and they can change by size. They will be smaller than shade leaves. The shape can change to some extent, and certainly chlorophyll density will change, whereas the shade leaves will have much more chlorophyll in it than the sun leaves because it's going to have to capture more light. Now, as an example, there's a picture there with my hand in it that you can see. That's a picture of Carolina allspice that I took at the Hahn Botanical Garden in Virginia Tech. And I really was interested in that because the leaves really are more like the other picture I show under sun leaves. That is also Carolina allspice. And you can see the leaf that I took in the shade. They are much small, but much larger, I should say, much thinner. And you can see they don't have that nice thick cuticle and shine that the sun leaves have. So there is a difference between leaves that grow in the shade and in the sun. The problem that we get, and that's where we get into acclimatization, is if we move plants, say seedlings we have growing indoors for gardens, or plants that you have sitting under a tree in a pot and you're going to move it out in full sun right away. When you do that, you can have issues with it. Like you can see in this picture. This is a Brugmansia, one of my trumpet plants, angel trumpet it's called. It's a tropical plant, so I have to bring it indoors. This was a cutting that I did back in the fall, rooted cutting, and I planted it in a pot, and I had it growing in a north-facing window in my office all winter. And it was doing quite nicely there. Now, like most plant lovers, I could not wait for spring, and so in March, I took the potted plant. Now, I will give it a bigger plant, and I'll grow it on my patio, which is a south-facing area of my house, on the patio, full sun all day. But I moved these out right, and you can see that they're on the table on my patio in full sun. And you can see what happened to the leaves. That's called sunburn, okay? That essentially, what really happens with sun leaves is that they produce a chemical or a series of molecules and chemicals that protect the cells from very harsh or intense sunlight. Shade leaves don't need that, so they don't have it. And just like people that have to put on sunscreen when they go out in full sun and they haven't been acclimatized to full sun and they don't have a tan and they will burn, the same thing happens with plants. So you can see what happened when I pulled them out in full sun. Now that's on the older leaves, okay? You can see the newer leaves, and you see in this shot a little more clearly, the new leaves that have developed since I put it out are nice and green because the plant then started that full intensity sun, initiated the production of this sunscreen, if you will, this sunblock, and I'm not going to get into the chemistry of it, that will protect those cells from that intense sun. So I will lose those lower leaves, but the plant will be no worse for that because you can see the new leaves are coming out. So what I should have done is I should have slowly moved them out into the full sun. Acclimatization is a process of taking them from one location, usually shadier, in your house if it's seedlings for your garden or something, and slowly getting them used to the outdoors. Okay, and you're talking about sun or light intensity, you're talking about temperature, as well as wind and all. They have to get hardened off. That's what we call harden off. Now, every gardener knows a little bit about hardening off, and they know they have to do that. But this is the reason why, because plants in intense light that aren't used to it can get this sunburn. So, what I should have done with this is I could have put it in my backyard, but moved it out into the sun for maybe an hour initially, and then back into the shade outside still. Okay. And I would do that for a day or two, and then move it out for a couple more hours, for a few more days, back into the shade. And then maybe by the third, fourth day, I'll have it out there for 3 or 4 hours. And ultimately, it might take a week, depending on the plant. It might take 2 weeks for it to become fully acclimated. So this is a very important process, and there is a difference between sun leaves and shade leaves. So let's talk about what full sun and partial sun and shade is. If you go to buy a plant at a local greenhouse or nursery, on the label it will indicate to you what kind of conditions it needs to grow in. And it will say full sun, it will say partial shade or partial sun, dappled sun, or full shade, depending on what the plant is. What does that really mean? Okay, you can actually quantify that. All right, full sun technically means getting direct full sunlight for about 6 hours or more. Actually, it's more than 6 hours. They need that to grow and thrive. Well, you'll see this in a lot of the annuals and perennials you buy, although there are many shade-loving perennials out there. Certainly for your vegetables, most of the vegetables except the leafy vegetables, you will need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight. All right. Now, if it says partial shade or partial sun, that's a range from 3 to 6 hours. So if it says partial shade, you're usually looking at about 3 hours of full sun. 3 to 4 hours, you're at the lower end of that range. If it says partial sun, it's up to about 6 hours of full sun for the day. Okay. Now, a lot of plants will need some sun, even if they are partial shade or partial sun, to set seed, to flower, set seed, and fruit. So usually partial shade or partial sun is 3 to 6 hours. Then there's another thing called dappled sun. You don't see that too often, but you all know inherently what that means. It's under a tree where the sunlight is kind of coming through, but not constantly on the plant. Many woodland plants like that, understory plants, dogwoods, for instance, like the dappled sun, they're understory plants in nature. And where do we normally see them grown in our homes? And in the city, they're out in full sun, and that does stress them out, and they will get dog boar and some other things when you move them out of those conditions. Okay, then the next step, or the next one lower, is full shade. But let me warn you, that doesn't mean no sun at all. Okay, full shade doesn't mean 24 hours or whatever the daylight is, 14 hours of no sun. They do need some sun. Usually, it's less than 3 hours. Okay, and understand that these aren't cut and dry. In other words, plants, there are different combinations of these things when you have full shade. So it does need some sun to really grow and do well in. Okay, let's talk a little bit about plant light. And what is it? We talk about light, we talk about full sun, light that we have coming in our windows. We grow things inside. We might bring some flowers in that we really like in the fall that won't get through the winter. And we pot them up and we bring them in, and we wonder why they're not doing well, because it has to do with the type of light that they're getting inside. So essentially, what light is a form of electromagnetic radiation. I know that sounds highfalutin, but that's essentially what it is. Now, there's a reason I'm going here, because I'm going to show you the range of it. What we're going to talk about today, just quickly, is about quality of light. It's not just intensity. We will talk about intensity and also duration of light. Okay, so the light is on a scale that is within 400. The light that we can see, the visible light, is from 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers. Now, that's not that important to understand, but I want to show you this in context of what this means. It also so happens that light within this range is what plants need to grow. Okay, they don't do well, or they won't grow beyond that 400 to 700. And just to kind of put it in context, let me show you this this scale of electromagnetic radiation. Okay, you see that small little area in the middle, the little rainbow type area? That is what we see. The electromagnetic radiation goes well beyond in frequency and size and intensity. Okay, it goes all the way from, on the right there you see long radio waves with a very long frequency and is very low in energy, all the way up to the other end of gamma rays, which is very high energy, and actually rays in that area can do a lot of damage and destroy tissue, okay, on us or on any animal tissue and plants as well. Now, it just so happens that it's rays in that range that are used in cancer treatment. When you hear about somebody getting radiation treatment for cancer, it's in the gamma rays because it does destroy living tissue. But it has to be directed to the cancer. Otherwise, it will destroy any other tissue around it. That's just a little side note. But I just wanted to show you in context where the visible light range is that we can see and that plants need. Okay? And we call that photosynthetically active radiation, or PAR. This is that range that we perceive and that plants need. There's an expanded view of it, and there it is in that full radiation level. I just want to show you in context what actually is out there in radiation and what we're dealing with. All right, so when you're dealing with this, we talk about light, the quality of the light. Okay, that means the visible range within that, you're going from infrared light or the red range to the violet, and beyond that, the ultraviolet range. And you can see in this particular slide that you have blue light is at the 450 nanometer, red light 650, and far red at about the 730. Okay, now it's interesting because plants need these different wavelengths to grow and to do well. They need light from the 450 range, it's a pretty wide range, to 650 just for photosynthesis, just to grow. When you get into the 650 and 730, they need that for flowering. So if you're only giving them, if it's grown indoors and you're only giving them that, a short area or not that full range, then that's why a lot of plants will not grow well indoors, even with supplemental lights, if we're not giving them the correct type or quality of light. Typically, if you're growing indoors, you're going to get that full range if you have about 2 fluorescent tubes and 1 incandescent light will meet that. And you'll see that on another slide. So we're going to measure light right now. That's quality, okay? And again, this is mainly for those that are growing, starting their seedlings indoors. And you have to understand, when you have them in a window and they start etiolating and growing tall and get real thin, we talked about acclimatization. When you move them out, you don't put them right in the garden in full sun. And while they're growing there, they will do better and they will need less acclimatization if you're giving them that full range of light quality that we talked about. If you don't, then you get the very spindly and very thin, and you're going to take some time to acclimate them. Okay, so let's talk about measuring light. So we talked about quality and what range that the light that plants need, but there's certain intensities that they need. Now, the two main units that we measure light is foot candles and lux. We're going to talk about light in foot candles because that's the convention that we use in the United States. However, there's a limitation in measuring light this way, because what you are measuring is the light at that moment. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit later about duration and light accumulating over a day period and what that means to plants. All right, but this can give you some indication of how much light you're going to be getting if you can measure it with a meter. Okay, these are photometric units based on visible light that we can see in the human eye. Now, just so happens, let me show you, I have a meter, a light meter here, that's going to measure, and the key is, let me see, okay, it's going to measure intensity at the moment that we measure it, all right? And that's important to keep in mind because that is somewhat of a limitation. So let me get this thing up, and we're going to measure, and I'm going to show you how your eyes can be very deceiving when you're trying to look at light and determine how much light you have and if you have enough to grow plants on. Okay, I'm in the middle of a living room here. There's windows on either side. There's a light on, and it's very bright, and I can see things very clearly. However, when I measure it right in here, you're only talking about 8 to 9 foot candles. Okay, let me see if you can see this. That's what we're measuring. There's 7.3. I'm trying to get it. There we go. Okay, that's the foot candles that we're getting here in the middle of this bright living room. Okay, so now next I want to do is I want to take you over to the window and measure it right up against the window, show you what that is, and then even coming off a few inches, 6 to 12 inches away from the window, and show you how drastically it decreases. Okay, so photosynthesis needs light intensity to a certain point. All right. For instance, outside, and we're going to show you outside here in a minute. We'll go out there and measure what it's out there. But in full sun on a sunny day, you're talking about 10,000 foot candles. That's way more than you need to grow healthy plants. Most plants will need from a minimum, absolute minimum of 100 foot candles to about 2,500. Some plants will use that light energy beyond 2,500 foot candles and continue to grow, but most plants sort of max out at that. And then if you start getting into those higher ranges, it can either destroy plant tissue or plant material or just do nothing for the plant. Okay, so what we're looking at is about 2,500 foot candles. To get about 500 foot candles, as I mentioned earlier, and you're growing indoors, you need about 2 new 40 watt fluorescent bulbs and a 25 watt incandescent to get that range, that quality. But also keep in mind, as I'm going to show you here in a minute, that how close you have it to the lamp makes a big difference in how many foot candles you're getting. Usually that lamp has to be almost right on the plant to get enough foot candles, and I'll show you that by showing it in the window over here. We're going to look at the northwest facing window, south facing window, and then we'll go outside. Here we are at the window. As I said, this is a northwest facing window. It does have a roof over the porch, so we're not getting direct sunlight in here, but the light has increased exponentially. We're up to about 320 some 22 foot candles right with the meter right on the window. If you can look on here, you can see the reading on that. Okay, so it really has jumped up. Still pretty low though. Okay, not probably enough to grow many of your plants. Certainly not flowering plants. All right, now as I move this meter away, it drops down. I'm about probably about 6 inches away, and it's dropped down to 268, 270 foot candles. Okay, it's jumping around, but you can see where its range is. Let's move it back to about a foot, and I'm down to about 230 foot candles. So you can see, just moving it that little bit, it has reduced, the foot candles have gone down quite a bit. All right, so that should tell you something. That should tell you that if you're growing plants over the winter and at a window where the window is facing, a north-facing window, south-facing window, how close it is to the window all makes a good difference. Okay, now we're moved over to the south side of the house, and we have a south-facing window to show you the difference of what we had from that north-facing. What do we have there? About 300 foot candles right up against it. Here, with the sun coming through, we are already at about over 5,000. Now, if you look at the meter, you will see it says 500 and something. Well, that's times 10. I had to increase it, the readout to 10 times to get it. So we're at about over 5,000, 5,500 or so foot candles. Quite a significant difference from that northwest facing window with the overhang. Now, as I come away from this window, the south facing window, to about 6 inches, it does drop, but not dramatically. Let me go back here okay, we're down to, I have to change the magnitude here now. Okay, let me try that again. All right, 12 inches from that south facing window with full sun, we are down from about 5,000 to just jumping to about 1,000 to 2,000 foot candles. So dramatic, 12 inches, and it's decreased by almost half. Next, we will be going outside, and I will show you what it is out in the full sun and in dappled shade as well, just so you can see the difference in the intensity of these areas. Now, my eyes, I'm looking out, and it looks really bright to me. Okay, there is a lot of light here. It does measure right up against the window about 5,000. Where I'm standing, it's probably around 1,500 to 2,000 foot candles. Significant change from just a few inches away. All right, so now we're outside and we're in the shade of this beautiful magnolia tree on a sunny day, and I'm reading about 600 foot candles. So even out here, that's pretty low in this shade. This is full shade right now. With the tree and the house blocking the sunlight. Just a few steps more and I'm out into full sun, and it is jumping all the way up to, wow, we are at 10,000 foot candles, and we moved about a matter of 4 feet from full shade to full sun. So it's quite a magnitude, quite a difference. I hope that shows you and illustrates to you how different the intensity can be, even though our eyes seem to feel, or we use our eyes to determine how much light is there. They're really not good meters. You really need something to really show you that. Okay, we're going to go back inside, and I want to talk a little bit about light duration. We've talked about intensity and quality. Now we're going to talk about duration, which is really where the rubber meets the road when it comes to plant growth. All right, so we talked about intensity, but as I said before, that is measured at that moment. What plants really respond to is how much they get over the day. In other words, duration. So I just want to talk a little bit about light duration, and that's usually measured as daily light integral. That means how much it's gathering for the whole day, from morning till night. When the sun goes down, it's going to take in so much light. Now, it might be more intense at certain parts of the day. When in the morning, when the sun is low on the horizon, even if there's no shade there, the intensity is going to be lower than in the afternoon, and of course then in the evening as well. It's going to get a little lower. But it's that measurement over that entire day that really what's going to make a difference for your plants. Now, I'm not going to go into all the specifics about it, but just let me explain to you that we measure that DLI, or that daily light integral, as moles per day. And you can see there's a whole calculation up there. I'm not going to go into that. You don't need to know that. But that is the moles per day, is how much a plant needs to gather for that day to grow well. Okay, and every plant's a little bit different. Okay, they have different requirements. Think of it as sort of like a rain gauge. All right, as a rain gauge, as it rains, the rain gauge collects water, and for any given minute, it gets so much water, maybe an eighth of an inch or whatever for any given integral or part. But over the entire rain length, say for a day, it's going to get 2, 3, 4 inches, whatever the rain will give you, and it'll accumulate that much. Think of that in the same way that you would how much light accumulates over the day, or the daily light integral. Okay, so we measure that in moles, how much it's getting. That has to do with intensity. That has to do with longevity, or the length of the day. So obviously, with the same intensity of light that you're getting, 500 foot candles, 1,000 foot candles look like it's great, but in winter it might only be collecting maybe 2, 3, or 4 moles for the whole day, because the day's shorter than it would in the summer, where it's longer and you're going to get more moles per day. And just to quantify that for you a little bit, low light crops, I call crops, but plants, if you will, they don't need a whole lot of light. Maybe your shade light plants need 3 to 6 moles per day accumulation, okay? Just to put it in context so you have a general idea of what we're talking about. Medium light plants are 6 to 12 moles. The high light plants are 12 to 18, and then very high light like corn and crops like that are going to need 18 or more moles per day. They got to be out there, and it's got to be in the summertime to grow. Tomatoes are probably the same thing. All right, that's just to kind of give you an idea. You don't have to qualify, but I wanted you to understand that when you're going from plants that will grow in shade, how much difference there is in how much energy they are collecting for that entire day. So let's just look at some plants, okay? Now, I have these as low light plants. Many of you are familiar with them. You know, we call them shade loving plants. You got lily of the valley, Solomon seal, hostas, bleeding heart fern, oak leaf hydrangea will all do well in the shade. But remember, when we talked about shade, they need at leleast up to, should say 3 hours of sun. And then we have medium light plants, okay, which are in this range where you're talking 6 to 12 moles per day. They need a little bit more light. Now, I have this saying with my master gardeners: the plants don't read the literature. Okay, they don't always follow what the textbooks say. These are living organisms, and they're going to respond to a lot of other factors. So you know, plants like euchera or coral bells, they like shade. We think of them as shade-loving plants, but they will do well with a medium light area, partial light to partial sun. And what also I didn't mention is, when is it getting that partial sun and partial shade? That will make a difference as well. All right. So if you have plants that are in the shade all morning and they're only getting, say, 3, 4, 5 hours of sun, which would be in the partial shade to partial sun category, but it's middle of the afternoon, that still may be too intense or too much light for them. So it depends on when they're getting that full sun that partial sun or that partial shade, whether it's in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening will make a difference. All right, so these medium light plants and these low light plants, they are kind of interchangeable depending on the quality of the light and the time of day that they're getting that full sun. Okay, and then finally, I just wanted to mention, and you all know what highlight plants are. Those are plants that just thrive in the full sun. I consider myself a plantsman before I do anything else, a horticulturist, entomologist, or anything. I love plants. I love working with plants. And I just put some neat plants on there that like full sun that you may not always be familiar with. When I lived in Florida, all these plants were grown by everyone in Florida. You don't see pentas so much up here. You can get them. Lantana I've seen growing up here, but they are common down there. Gaillardia is fairly common. Mandevilla, we grow that in our pots in our backyard in full sun, and they're absolutely beautiful. They bloom all summer. There's Ixora, a shrub that will bloom and give you lots of color throughout the summer. Again, full sun. And then one of my favorites is desert rose. Now this plant is definitely, these other plants are, all of them are tropical or subtropical, and will be treated as an annual, okay? Or you can bring them in and you can use what you've learned about light to have them growing inside with in a window or with supplemental light. But desert rose is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of my favorites. I don't talk about it much, but it is absolutely beautiful in full flower. And you can see this if you had that on a pot in your patio, and it will do that all summer long. And so, and I can go on and on about full sun. We know a lot of them that we grow up here, petunias and geraniums and various annuals that we grow. Shrubs like roses and lilac and viburnum are all full sun as well. Okay, well, that's all I have for today. If you have any questions on the subject or any ideas about what videos you want me to do, please leave them in the comments below. If you have any questions horticultural questions or entomological questions that you have questions about for your gardening or your yard, please visit the website that you see there, and we will try to get back with you. Thank you.